called The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down by Anne Fadiman, and I'm Elizabeth Todd.
I'm Karen Sonnenberg and Amy.
Alina.
And Alina's going to get us started and just kind of give you a general overall idea, synopsis of what the book was about.
Okay, I'm going to start from the bottom. History, how history played a role in Hmong culture. Hmong, they came from China, and literally they basically were pushed off their land. This is just a history of just bloody scrimmages, as they described in the book, of just constantly being pushed and pushed and pushed until they ended up in Thailand. But throughout all of it, they stayed very close, and they stayed close to their traditions. Even though they broke off into clans, those clans stayed very tight and kept their traditions up very well. There's one description here about the Hmong, just about their spirit. They do not like to take orders. They do not like to lose. They would rather flee, fight, or die than surrender, and that they are not intimidated by being outnumbered. They are rarely persuaded that the customs of other cultures, even those more powerful than their own, are superior, and that they are capable of getting very angry. So that is the spirit of Hmong people, and that's what they carried with them as refugees over to America. So this family in particular with this book is the Lee family, and their daughter Leah, when she was 3 months old, she had a seizure, her first seizure, but they believed it was because her older sister slammed the door and her spirit kind of scattered. And so not understanding how American medicine works, they did carry their daughter to Marseille Hospital and were treated through the American way. So basically what this book is a conflict of cultures, is a culture clash. So where the American medical system treats the body, the Hmong treat the spirit. And so where doctors are constantly prescribing Leah with new medications, sometimes 3 or 4 at a time, they're looking for a spiritual healer to come in and work with Leah. And so once she's diagnosed with epilepsy, the conflict came with all the medicines. So what they are thinking that the parents are understanding, the parents are not understanding. They're not following the directions of the medications. And the big part of that is that there was not only a language barrier, but there was a cultural barrier as well. And so the doctors, instead of both sides really kind of working together, it became a tug of war. And this poor Leah is in the middle of it. And they both think that they're right. So the doctors think that they're right, giving the medications from what they understand epilepsy to be, and the family, Leah's parents, did not follow those because they were doing what they felt was best for Leah. Ultimately, because of this tug of war, Leah ended up having a seizure that sent her into a vegetative state by the time she was 7 years old. And so Anne Fadiman, what she's doing is coming in as a journalist. She heard that there were misunderstandings going on at this hospital. She wanted to report it and keep record of it. So she actually went to meet the Lee family. She talked to the doctors at the hospital and got an understanding of it. And her reporting is what this book is about. It was truly amazing to read what this family went through and just the cultural differences.
And I just want to add to that, I thought with the way that she wrote the book, she did a really good job of presenting both sides of the story as well. And the layout of the book, she actually alternated between a piece of the history of the Hmong and then a piece of Leah's story. So she would go back and forth, and it would keep you kind of in suspense of Leah's story throughout the whole book. So kind of added to it. So we'll just go over some of the main themes of the book. And what we did was we just picked out some quotes from the book that we thought did a very good job of summing up the main themes and the main points of the book. So the first one, the language barrier, was the most obvious problem, but not the most important. The biggest problem was the cultural barrier. So this just speaks to that the problem that was most obvious, that was great on the surface, was the language. And at times they didn't even have interpreters in the hospital. They couldn't afford interpreters. which actually when she had her first seizure at 3 months, it was misdiagnosed for like the first couple of times that she came in. And if there was a better way of communicating, as far as the language barrier goes, then that may have changed the ultimate result of the story. But beyond that, on the surface, the most important barrier was the cultural barrier and the cultural understanding of those differences.
And then this quote, when you fail one Hmong patient, you fail a whole community. It really tells a lot about how Hmong communities are so tightly knit, and there's so much emphasis on community, and like our speaker said, everybody, the whole family lives together, and everybody's helping out with each other, and so there's a lot of communication within the community, and a lot of trust with who you know. And so if you fail one Hmong family, it gets around, like words gets around really fast, and so it's almost like if you lose the trust with like one Hmong patient, everybody will know, and then there's a lot of mistrust and a lot of misunderstanding that will go around, and then the Hmong families or community will mistrust like the healthcare system, the Western healthcare systems.
And then the third quote, the need to understand that as powerful an influence as the culture of the Hmong patient and her family is on this case, the culture of biomedicine is equally powerful. If you can't see that your own culture has its own set of interests, emotions, and biases, how can you expect to deal successfully with someone else's culture? Mm-hmm. So that just speaks to the fact that there are strengths and weaknesses within every medical system. And it's understanding those differences that ultimately will keep you happy.
And the last theme was a little medicine and a little name, which in Hmong means like soul, spirit. And so it's pretty much an understanding, a cultural competency or cultural understanding of the two different, of like the Western culture and the Hmong culture, and kind of finding a balance, a compromise between those two. So.
And then for our interview, we interviewed Dennis Mao, and he's a friend of Liz's, 27-year-old young man living in the Twin Cities. And he was great to come and meet with us on a Saturday morning and spend some time with us. So we had a variety of different questions, and our conversation just kind of unfolded during our visit with him. We started out asking him about what are some of the current health issues within the Hmong culture here, the Hmong community. And he said gout was one of their biggest things that they're battling right now, and not only with the elderly Hmong people, but with the younger Hmong generations too. And that can be a high level of uric acid in your body. That's what causes gout. And when I was reading a little bit more about that, there was a research article that was talking about the high level of kidney stones too, which is another thing with the uric acid in the Hmong culture. And that could be just genetically they're more predisposed, or it could be linked to their diet. If you have a diet high in animal meats, animal organs, that can cause a higher level of uric acid. Hypertension, heart disease were also two other areas, he said, that the Hmong culture is battling, and dietary issues. Stated that their diet is very high in fat, particularly pig fat. So there's kind of there needs to be more education around health and nutrition and those, how they link to some of those chronic issues that the Hmong population is experiencing. We asked him what the view of the Western model of healthcare is within the Hmong community. And the younger generation has a better understanding about what Western medicine can offer them. But the older generation, the elders within the Hmong community, are very fearful about going to see physicians or seeking medical care here within our system. And many of them feel like they will get worse if they go to the hospital or go to the doctor, which was also brought out in our book. Even though they were trying to help Leah, the Lee family felt that the medical system at times actually made her sicker than she was prior to seeing them. So it's interesting that that still is within the culture, especially with the elders. Dennis said his father had a stroke within the last few years, I believe it was, and he said they had to drag him to the hospital. I mean, he really did not want to go because they feel they'll go there and their situation will get worse. There's also a lack of understanding on all the medical tests. You know, when